Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our international webinar on African indigenous governance. We are very lucky because so far we have received more than 250 registrations for our webinar, and we hope that all of them can join our discussion. I would like first to thank the Global Humanity for Peace Institute, and in particular, Sherto, Jill, and Gareth Thompson, for jointly organizing this webinar with our think tank, Afrospectives. I would like also to thank their colleague, Dispoina, for her technical assistance. Allow me to express again our deep gratitude to the panelists who agreed to share the findings of their research and thoughts on this issue. I finally would like to thank the moderator for accepting this difficult task and all the participants who responded to our invitation. Some people might wonder why we have chosen the issue of indigenous governance when Africa is facing more important and urgent problems such as the COVID-19 pandemics, the food crisis caused by the war in Ukraine, poverty, and other levels of underdevelopment. Well, it is precisely, I would say, it is precisely to break with these miserabilistic discourses on Africa that we have decided to address this subject, which is often relegated to ethnology. The question of indigenous governance is at the heart of the major challenges faced by the African nation today. What is at stake here is how they could regain and recover their intellectual, political, and cultural sovereignty in order to meet the expectation and aspiration of their people. At a time when Africa's agenda is set by external actors and its post-colonial elites continue to believe in the ready-made thinking about development and democracy, we found it important to understand the characteristic of political ontology in African traditional societies. We believe that such a debate would allow us better understand why governance is part of a larger system of interpretation, interactions, and processes which define not only the nature of relationship between humans, but also with other living and non-living entities. This reflection would also inform us about the philosophical, spiritual, and ethical foundation of indigenous system of governance, and in particular, the very process of authority legitimization and power sharing. The current crisis of the dominant model of governance invite us to get out of the Eurocentric perspective of democracy and good governance and develop a critical thinking on the concept of sociability and governmentability in other cultures of the world. Africa is home, as we all know, to incredibly diverse model of socio-political organization, ranging from large multi-ethnic empires, centralized medium-sized kingdoms, to small homogeneous community entities. It is the continent per excellence where sophisticated method of consensus building, conflict resolution, relational reconciliation, and pluralistic lifestyle has been invented and experienced. Revisiting the theory and practice of their indigenous governance should therefore be natural endeavor in African contemporary nations. But beyond their utility and relevance, I think that knowing how pre-capitalist society have organized themselves to facilitate peace, living together, and cooperation might be an asset or a tool for survival in a world faced by the risk of total collapse. So our webinar today is divided into 3 parts. In the first session, scholars who have undertaken field research will present some concrete example of the numerous systems of governance that exist in Africa and that have survived colonization and instrumentalization by the nation states. The second session will address some experiences and practices of revalorization of traditional governance to deal with specific situations. The third part will be a general discussion to draw lessons from these practices and experiences, to analyze the constraints and challenges of the revitalization, and to define guidelines for African countries interested and willing to explore their cultural heritage on governance. So we expect that this recommendation will address some important features of democratic governance, such as the process of consensus building and decision-making, the mode of representation, selection, and accountability of leadership, the rights and duty of individuals and groups, the inclusion and protection of minority groups, and the civic education that should accompany all these processes. This webinar will be the first of a series that we envisage to organize with Global Humanity for Peace Institute on the system of governance of other regions of the world, in the Americas, Asia, Pacific, Middle East, etc., to compare the commonalities and differences, identify value, principles, and practices that could help construct a vision of shared humanity and universality. So I would like now give the floor to Sherto Jill, the director of the Global Humanity for Peace Institute, to welcome you and to share additional information about the content of our webinar. So please, Sherto.